graded. You'll get those on Monday probably. Okay, so I want to pick up on 230, which is just a couple pages back from where we left off. Touchstone says that he will serve Sabriel, against the enemies of the kingdom. And she asks Maggid, what have you told him? Maggid said, state of the kingdom, generally speaking, recent events, descent here, more or less, your duty as Abhorsen, just recent stuff. The Mordicant, Shadow Hands, Gore Crows, the Dead Adept, whoever it may be. That is, did you tell him about all that other stuff? No, not specifically. I thought he could presume as much. In other words, no, I'm going to ease him into it, kind of. So, she addresses Touchstone to kind of fill him in. As you see, my minion has not been totally honest with you. I was raised across the wall in ENGL, so I have very little idea about what is going on. In other words, you say you want to serve me, let's be sure you know what you're signing up for. I don't know jack about anything this side of the wall. Okay, she knows the Book of the Dead. That doesn't tell her how to survive this side of the wall. Okay? I have huge gaps in my knowledge of the Old Kingdom, including everything from geography to history to charter magic. Why? Because they didn't teach her any of that stuff at the college she went to. College not like MTSU. Boarding school. Prep school. For what would essentially be college, okay? So she says, I face some dire enemies, just to make sure he's aware of what he's signing up for, probably under the overall direction of one of the greater dead, a necromantic adept. So, if you're going to help me, you've essentially got to be prepared to fight, I don't know, maybe not Satan, but Satan's right-hand man, Beelzebub, This is not something to be entered into lightly. And I'm not out to save the kingdom. That's her way of saying, I don't care about the kingdom. I care about my father. Just to find my father, the real Abhorsen. So I don't want to take your oath or service or anything like that, particularly as we've only just met. Happy for you to accompany us to the nearest approximation of civilization, but I have no idea what I will be doing after that. In other words, you're free to come along till we come to the next big town, and then bye-bye. You can leave then. She wants to keep it just herself and Maggid. And please, remember, Sabriel, not Abhorsen, not milady. Call me by my name. Okay? He looks at her, stares at her as she walks away. Maggid goes over to where to where Touchstone is, and says to him, kind of as if Maggid is reading Touchstone's mind. I'm not saying he is reading his mind, but it's almost like he knows the gears are turning. And says, she really did grow up in ENGL. That is, she's not lying about that. She doesn't realize refusing your oath is an insult. See, that's one of the things about the Old Kingdom she doesn't understand at all. He has sworn an oath to her, and she says, buzz off, buddy. And it's true enough about her ignorance. Well, the fact that she didn't realize refusing his oath shows that she's pretty ignorant. That's one of the reasons she needs your help. Touchstone, I don't remember much. Well, yeah, he's been asleep for 200 years. Or quasi-dead in death would kind of make one forget a few things. I wasn't insulted. It's probably one of the things he's forgotten, that I should be insulted. But he says, my oath isn't worth much. Now, does Maggid completely understand why his oath isn't worth much? I'll give a little bit away. Yeah, he does. Why? Because Maggid was around 200 years ago. when Touchstone, not his real name, was essentially put to sleep. But you'll help? Notice, not a question. This is Margaret kind of commanding, okay? Little white furry cat telling, I don't know, 6'2" Chris Hemsworth, you've got to do this. No. Help is for equals. I'll serve her. Okay, we come to find out this guy's a prince. He is the future king. And he's going to serve? Kings don't serve. Future kings don't serve. They're to be served. Huh. Okay. So, she, after breakfast, asks Touchstone, you don't know how to get out of this sinkhole, do you? No. Wait. Yes, I do. And he talks about a hidden stair, etc. Okay. Bottom of 233. He says, yeah, to the north of King Janur, however you pronounce the guy's name, ship. But I don't know which one that is. She says, well, there's only 4 ships, so it can't be that hard. She says, how's your memory of the kingdom, for example, of geography? In other words, once we get out of the sinkhole, since we don't have a map, will you be able to find your way to Belisar? She doesn't ask that literally. It's implied, kind of. He says, I'm not sure. And he guardedly bows his head again. He's bowing to her. She doesn't like this. The servile manner that went with it seemed to be an affectation. That is, the pretending to be a servant when he answers the question and bows. He was like a bad actor playing the butler, or rather, a non-actor trying to impersonate a butler as best as he could. But why? Is he used to bowing to other people? Okay, take the 200 years sleep out of it. When he was awake. No, he's not. Okay? So he's got to kind of work those muscles that he's not had to work before, so to speak. So she shows him the map that Margaret drew. She shows him where she thinks they are, 234. And Touchstone says, no, you're not there. This is Whole Hallow. It's only 10 leagues from the coast and the same latitude as Mount Anderson. She goes, good, you do remember. So, best way to get to Belisar. And how long? He says, I don't know, current conditions. Well, what does he mean by current conditions? Well, when I was alive 200 years ago, the current conditions were, it wouldn't be that bad. But just take the United States 200 years ago. This is 2018, so 1818. To get from Murfreesboro to D.C. Okay, today you could drive there in 12 hours. Not so much in 1818. Okay? From what Margaret says, the kingdom is in a state of anarchy. Towns and villages may no longer exist. There may be bandits, the dead, free magic, etc. She goes, okay, ignoring all of that. Well, you can't really ignore all of that. That's like saying, I'm not going to pay any attention to possible, radar traps and cops, etc., etc. So he says, well, okay. And he gives her directions of what they probably should do. And he says, we should go to Nesto, Magat, 236. A ship or boat from Nesto, if we can find one, and if either of you can sail it. Well, what would Sabriel know about sailing? Being raised landlocked. Probably not much, unless there was something in the Book of the Dead about it. Book of the Dead probably doesn't have a chapter just in case you need to know how to sail. Okay? He probably would know, but he hasn't done it for 200 years. Okay? So, they find the stair. We can skip that. Touchstone offers to carry Sabriel's pack. She gets offended. She says, no, I'll carry it. Yeah, let's look at that. 241. They're making their way up the stair. She says, I'll carry it. He says, fine, passes it to her. Half an hour later, perhaps a third of the way up the narrow stone-carved stair, Sabriel regretted her decision to take the pack. She still wasn't totally recovered from the paper ring crash, and the stair was very steep, so narrow that she had difficulty negotiating the spiraling turns. Pack always seemed to jam against the outside or inside wall, no matter. And so she says, well, maybe we should take it in turns. Why? I mean, most obvious reason. Pride. Okay? That's her saying, no, I'll take the pack. It's her pride. Now she says, let's take it in turns. What has she realized? Okay, we're told there may be a third of the way up the stair. Have you ever been on a really tall, winding staircase? Okay? There's a place in London. There's a bunch of places in London, obviously. But there's a monument in London called, oddly enough, the Monument. That's its actual name. And it was built shortly after the Great Fire of London in 1666. Okay? And the monument is, I don't remember, I think it's 204 feet tall, 311 steps. Okay? And the outside base of the monument, it's probably about the size of this room, the footprint. But when you get to the top of the monument, it's probably from that wall to maybe here. So it gets narrower the higher up you go. And when you start down at the bottom, the steps are about, I don't know, maybe 2 feet wide. By the time you get to the very top, the steps are about probably 12 inches. So if you're going up and somebody's coming down, you got to do this. Okay? And if you're somewhat broad-shouldered, like I am, you can't walk. By the time you get 3/4 of the way up, you can't walk straight up the stairs. You've kind of got to go sideways. And if you're really large, you can't go up. Because you can't fit. And if you've got a backpack on, it's usually best to leave it down with somebody because you can't navigate the turns. That's what she's finding out. Okay? What else is she finding out? I'm stupid for not taking his help when he offered it because the backpack's heavy. So maybe we should take turns. So Touchstone takes it. And she says, okay, then I'll lead. Touchstone, no. Notice, he doesn't say, well, maybe. He says, no. Why? There are guards and guardians on this stair. I know the words and signs to pass them. You're the Abhorsen. They might let you pass, but I'm not sure. As he climbs the stair, what's happening? He's starting to remember more. Why? Because he's awake. He's becoming more and more awake. The longer he's awake, it's like these memories are flooding back. That's why earlier I told myself we would skip it. Page 239, Sabriel asks him, are you all right? He goes, not really. I remember what I would not and forget what I should not. I remember what I would rather not remember, a certain thing that happened 200 years ago, and I forget what I shouldn't forget. So I'd like to get these memories out, and I wish I could remember this stuff. But now he's starting to remember things about guards, passwords, things like that. Sabriel, your memory must be coming back. She's a genius, because he just said, is this there the one you mentioned when you said the queen was ambushed? Because he mentioned the queen being ambushed. No. Just, no. That stair was in Belisar. You get a little implication. No, and let's not talk about it. That's long ago, far away. Okay? They keep climbing. They get to the outside door, or they don't get outside, they get to the door that leads to the outside, 244, and Sabriel says, how does it open? I don't remember. Well, that's not any good. I mean, he's gotten them all the way to the top. Word signals now useless. She says, well, at least you got us up here. I'd still be sitting down there. Okay. She's trying to be helpful, right? Well, good job, Touchstone. You got us to the top of the passage. Now, we might, of course, die here if we can't get out, or we have to go all the way back down. Touchstone says, you would have found the way out, or Mogget would. Would! That's it. Mogget starts to say something and says, Touchstone, shut up. You're to be useful, remember? Sorry, thinking. And Sabriel says, don't call me milady. I've only just left school. I'm only 18. Sabriel, sorry, try to remember. It reminds me of my place in the world. That is, calling you milady tells me who I am. What does he mean? Calling her Sabriel means what? They're equals. Calling her by her first name puts them on an equal basis. Calling her milady puts him beneath, elevates her. Why does he want to do this? Yeah, it's because of what happened 200 years ago. Okay, which come Monday, I'm probably going to have to start talking about. So you might want to try to finish the novel before that. I'm not saying we'll have a quiz over the whole thing. Okay, so let's see here. I want to skip that. Go to 247. They get out, and there's a clearing, and then there's some woods. And top of 247, Touchstone says, the watchwood. Winter, spring? Winter, Sabriel says. Mogget, most of the wall, the long cliffs, Abhorson's house, are on or part of the southern plateau. Plateau is between 1,000 and 2,000 feet above the coastal plain. In fact, the area around Nesto, where we're headed, mostly below sea level. Touchstone, yeah, I remember, dikes, race, etc., etc. Okay. Sabriel says, okay, you guys are, you're being so informative. They're talking like about old time kind of stuff. And she says, would one of you care to tell me something I really want to know? That is, I don't need to know the geography and the topography of the land. It doesn't matter to me whether we're at sea level or 1,000 feet above. What I want to know is, what are the great charters? Now, we don't know what the great charters are yet because we've not been introduced to them. In other words, we are, for all intents and purposes, Sabriel on this journey. We don't know what Touchstone knows. We don't know what Mogget knows. We're in the dark and learning along as Sabriel does. And they both say, I can't. Mogget, because of his binding, can't explain what the great charters are. Touchstone, because of what's happened to him. There's a spell, a binding on us, Touchstone goes on. Someone who is not a charter mage or otherwise closely bound to the charter might be able to speak. A child, perhaps, baptized with the charter mark, but not grown into power. Mogget, it's pretty good. Sabriel, why would a child know what the great charters are? Mogget, if you'd had a proper education, you'd know. Waste of good silver. What's he mean? What do children often learn? Not at the English boarding school kind of college thing she went to, but in, grade school kind of stuff. What is one of the ways they learn? Nursery rhymes. And also, though it doesn't fit here exactly, fairy tales. Okay? She says, okay, maybe I know more of the Old Kingdom, or now that I know more of the Old Kingdom, I suspect being at school in Ancelstier saved my life. So now where do we go? Touchstone. We go east. Should be some charter stones leading from there to the eastern edge. A lot of magic. There were many stones. Okay. So they see the fields are flooded. Page 250. They get to the outside of Nesto. That is, they're looking down on this little, like, fishing village. And Touchstone says, because the fields are now flooded. There are no people in the fields, no one on this side of the village. Nesto's charter stone must be broken. Well, what have we already heard? What does it take to break a charter stone? Like cloven cleft. Crest, sorry.
A charter mage being sacrificed.
Okay, that's one way to do it. There are others. But, you sacrifice somebody on that stone and that will break it. Sabriel. And I smell a stench on the breeze. There are dead in the village. She doesn't mean corpses lying all over the place. She means living dead. Zombies, The Walking Dead. Cue the TV show. A boat would be the quickest way to Belissaire, Touchstone says. But if the dead are there, shouldn't we... Sabriel, let's go get a boat. Why? Because the sun is still up in the sky. She's going on this knowledge that the dead can't do much when the sun is high. They don't like the sun. Okay? So they go into Nesto, and we're told it's quiet. Bottom of 252. She can feel the presence of the dead things. Lesser dead. That is, there's no greater dead hanging around, but okay. They see a charter stone, a body in front of it, hands and feet bound, gaping cut across the throat. Okay. She kneels down by it, middle of 253. She could almost feel the cold of the currents beyond, leaking out around the stone, sucking warmth and life from the air. Things lurked there too, she knew, just beyond the border. That is, just into death. She sensed their hunger for life, their impatience for night to fall. As she expected, the corpse was a charter mage, dead 3 or 4 days. A woman, okay? She tells them the woman was killed 3 or 4 days ago. That's when the stone was broken. 254, a couple paragraphs down from there. Whoever, whatever killed her and broke the stone didn't enslave her spirit. Why? Enslaving that charter mage's spirit would have been an act of power that would give one power over the spirit. Okay? So, Sabriel does the spells, whatever, top of 255. She draws the charter marks for the funeral pyre, the corpse, etc. And then we're told, sweat beaded on her forehead and pain shot through her limbs, her hands shaking with effort, tongue clumsy, seeming swollen in her suddenly dry mouth. She can't do it this time. She did it just fine at Clovencrest. Okay, when she sent the one charter mage off to peace, but actually not Clovencrest, the first soldier that she met in the snow, found, not met because he was dead. But now she gets help. Then she felt assistance come, strength flowing through her, reinforcing the mark, steadying her hand, clearing her voice. She completed the litany, spark exploded above the woman, burns into flame. The extra strength came from Touchstone, his open palm lightly resting on her shoulder. So he reaches out and does this. So power flows from him into her. She gets up, connection's broken, and we're told Touchstone was a strong charter mage, perhaps as strong as she was. Okay. That surprises her. Why? Because she thinks he's a fool. Touchstone. He'd made no secret of being a charter mage. She just thought he was, could use fighting spells. Petty magics. Margaret, we should move on. Why? Well, it's getting dark, sun's starting to go down. Why else?
The dead are coming,
The dead are coming. They will perceive what she's just done. I think there's another reason. I don't think Mogget really wants her to question too much about Touchstone yet. Okay? He doesn't want her to think too deeply about how come this guy is such a powerful charter mage. So they go towards the harbor. They don't see any boats anywhere. Okay? And then they see kind of like a little island. Page 257, Mogget says, there are people on the island and boats tied up. She looks. She sees Mogget's right, page 258. Bunch of boats. And then she looks at the breakwater. Okay. And she sees a pile of timber on the island and says, the villagers fled to the island. What's she thinking? Abhorson's house. Surrounded by flowing water, the dead can't cross. They went out there for protection. There's a gap in the breakwater to keep running water between the island and shore, an ideal defense against the dead. I don't think even a Mordicant would risk crossing deep tidal water. The breakwater is not quite, a wall that rises up above, but it is a wall that causes waves to break there so that beyond there into the shore, it's relatively smooth. But it's something you can walk across. But there is a gap. It's this gap that the Mordicant, if there is one, would not be able to get across. The Mordicant could cross this part. Okay? She says, I don't think a Mordicant would try to get across that gap. Unless he has a bunch of grave dirt and, starts. So, Touchstone says, let's go. He sounded nervous. She looked at him, then above his head, and saw why. Clouds rolling in. Well, clouds are going to obscure the sun. That's going to make it dark. That's going to make the dead feel a little bit freer to start roaming around. So they start going across the breakwater, and what happens? Arrows start. 260. Instantly, Touchstone rushed in front of Sabriel, and she felt the flow of charter magic from him. His swords, he's got two, one in each hand, sketching a great circle in the air in front of them both. Glowing lines followed the sword's path till a shining circle hung in the air. This is kind of, if you saw the film, Doctor Strangey kind of stuff. He's making a glowing circle of light with the swords. Why? Because the swords are glowing because of the spells he's saying while doing this, whatever it is he's doing with them. 4 arrows curved through the air from the island. One struck the circle and disappears. Touchstone, arrow ward, effective, hard to keep going. Do we retreat? She says not yet. So they call out and they speak to them. People on the island speak back. Sabriel goes to answer, and Touchstone cuts her off. Top of 263. I am Touchstone, sworn swordsman for the Abhorsen who stands before you. Our arrows you're welcome for such folk as we. Notice, she gets angry. Who do you think you are? What makes you think you can speak for me? The elder addresses them. Sabriel says, I'm the Abhorsen, enemy of the dead. Okay. The old man says, I remember Abhorsen came here when I was a young man, top of 264. He came to put down the haunts that the spice merchant brought. Charter curse him, Abhorsen. I remember that coat you're wearing, blue as a 10-fathom sea with the silver keys. Yeah, and there was a sword too. Touchstone's going, show him the sword. You've got the coat, show him the sword. That's proof of who you are. Why? He. The elder keeps saying, he did this, he did that. Sabriel's clearly not a he. So she pulls out the sword. He says, okay, that's it. She's who she says he is. She says she is. So, as they start to make their way, the rest of the way across the breakwater, Touchstone kind of clues her in why he spoke up. Because she doesn't know Old Kingdom ways. It's traditional for someone of high rank, such as yourself, to be announced by their sworn swordsman. You know, when the president goes to deliver the State of the Union address, he doesn't just walk into the Capitol building, right? What happens when he walks into the House chamber? The sergeant at arms comes before and says, the President of the United States announces that person. Similarly, if you were to have an audience with the Queen in England, you'd go in and somebody would come and say, Her Majesty will see you now. She doesn't just walk in and, oh, how are you doing? And start jabbing her way. Protocol. This is government bureaucratic protocol. The only acceptable way for me to travel with you is as your sworn swordsman. Why? Because otherwise people are going to think we're lovers. You're 18. I'm pretty close. Well, 218. I'm pretty close to that age. They're just going to, assume that we're shacking up. Having your name coupled to mine in such a guise would lower you in most eyes. Your name, Abhorsen, with mine. Fool, moron, idiot, jerk, jester, clown. She's like, oh, thanks. What has he just done? I mean, I don't mean in his explanation to her, but his saying, I am the sworn swordsman, I can't say those words this morning, of Abhorsen. Okay. One, he's given himself a title. All right. What else has he done? He's bound himself to her. What else? Something for her. He's defended her honor. He's saying, essentially, I serve her. Nothing's going on. Pure as the wind-driven snow. She's untouched by me. Okay? Notice, feeling the flush of embarrassment come back and spread from her cheeks to her neck. So he tells her this, and she gets all red. It felt a lot like being on the receiving end of one of Miss Priante's severe social put-downs. Maggid, lesson 207, and others. Man, you've got a lot to learn. 3 out of 10. I wonder if they've got any fresh, etc., etc. So they go into the hut, and the woman, page 268, says that the dead will take us one by one. The woman continued, matter of fact, her voice filling the shed with dire certainty. Around her, people shuffled twitchily, not looking at her, as if to meet her gaze would be to accept her words. Most looked at Sabriel, and she saw hope in their eyes. Not blind faith or complete confidence, but, maybe we'll walk out of here. Because the elder woman, okay, look at that statement she says again. It'll take us one by one. It's not, it might take us. She's saying, we are all essentially what? But we don't know it yet. Yeah. Well, go even further than that. Dead. We are dead men walking, or dead women walking, dead people walking. It's just the act hasn't been performed yet. That's why nobody else will look at her. They're like, no, not me, maybe you. So when Sabriel looks at their eyes and they look at her, they're thinking, maybe, just maybe she can save us. Okay, now what else might they be thinking? After all, before they walked all the way across the breakwater, what did they see? What did Touchstone do? Some serious magic, I mean, that was pretty cool stuff. Shoot arrows and the arrows totally disappear. Can any of the people in the hut do this? No, so they're thinking maybe with the two of them combined? Elder, the abhorsen who came when I was young, the elder continued, Sabriel saw that at his age, this would be his memory alone of all the villagers, this abhorsen told me it was his purpose to slay the dead. He saved us from the haunts that came in the merchant's caravan. Is it still the same, lady? That is, are you here to save us from the dead? Are you here to make the dead stay dead, please? She starts thinking and mentally flicking through the pages of the Book of the Dead. Her thoughts strayed to her father, the forthcoming journey to Belisar, the way in which dead enemies seemed to be arrayed against her by some controlling mind. She says, yeah, I will ensure this island is free of the dead. Notice, this island. The town? That's got to wait. If she will say later, if I can come back and take care, then I will. But for now, I'll take care of the island. I cannot free the mainland village. There is a greater evil at work in the kingdom, that same evil that has broken your charter stone. I must find and defeat it as soon as I can. When that is done, then I'll return. And both village and charter stone will be restored. Village and charter stone be restored will mean you can move back from the island to the village, and the charter stone will do what? It's implied. We've never actually told what the charter stones do. They offer protection to the village. Think of it as like a lighthouse. And the light produced by the lighthouse offers protection to everything around it. Only this is a stone, and it's like magic emanates out from it. Okay? Elder, we understand. In other words, can't expect more than that. We can survive here. We can live on the island. There's a spring. There's fish. We've got boats, etc. Touchstone. You got to keep watching that breakwater, though. Why? Because if this gets filled in, all bets are off. The dead or their living slaves may try to fill it in with stones or push across a bridge. They can cross running water by building bridges. A man says, so we are besieged. But what of this dead thing already here on the island? In other words, something's already here. Silence fell. Rain sounded loud on the roof in the absence of human speech. The dead disliked the rain, Sabriel thought, inconsequentially as she considered the question. Rain didn't destroy, but it hurt and irritated the dead. Wherever the dead thing was on the island, it would be out of the rain. So if it's going to be out of the rain, where is it going to be?
Inside.
And so she stands up and starts looking. Mogget watches a piece of fish. Touchstone watches the villagers. 271. Sabriel closes her eyes. Why? Because she's going to reach out with the force, There it is. A faint, concealed emanation. She opens her eyes, looks straight at the point where her senses told her the dead creature lurked. She saw a fisherman, middle-aged, salt-etched face, red under sun-bleached hair, no different from the others, but something dead in him. Or close. He's wearing a boat cloak, which seemed odd. Why? Because the smoking shed was hot. A boat cloak. This isn't just, like a rain slicker. I've got one of these. I got it in Scotland a dozen years or so ago. It's a North Shore oilman's leather / suede cloak that is coated in oil. I mean, it's got oil in it. Why? To repel the rain and everything. Thing's pretty heavy. It's really good for when it's 15 degrees outside. You get much above 15 degrees, however, and it's like you're 80 degrees. Okay? This guy's wearing this thing in this probably smaller room than this that's got 40 or 50 people crammed in it. Well, 40 or 50 people, 98.6 body temperature, jacks that temperature up fast. Sabriel says, Notice, she doesn't address this guy specifically. Did anyone bring a large box with them out to the island? You know, arm span, square aside. Arm span. I don't think she means this kind of arm span, but she might, because this kind of arm span could indicate what kind of box. Yeah, because do your arms like this, and roughly that's your height. So, size of a body. It'd be heavy with grave dirt. As they talk, Sabriel walks about among them, and she signals Touchstone to stay close by. He does. Eyes flickering, Mogget glances up from his fish, you know, just to see what's going on for a moment. She takes a zigzag path. She finds the fisherman. Closer now, page 272. Sabriel was sure that the fisherman was a vassal of the dead. Technically, he's alive, but a dead spirit had suppressed his will. What does that mean? Modern parlance. You go to a horror film. He's possessed. Something is controlling him. Okay? Using his body as a puppet. Something highly unpleasant would be half submerged in his back. Now that's icky. If you've, well, what does Professor Quirrell have on the back of his head in the first Harry Potter novel? Lord Voldemort. Okay? So, Sabriel thinks, there's a whole page in the Book of the Dead all about this kind of thing. She says, the suspicious fisherman says to somebody else, I'm sure I saw you with a box like that, Petar. Jaw Stowart helped you get it ashore. Hey, Jaw. And in that instant, the dead-ridden Petar exploded into action, clubbing his questioner with both forearms, knocking him aside, running to the door. But Sabriel stops him. Petar slid to a halt, half-turned, but Touchstone was there behind him, twin swords glowing eerily. Sabriel eyed the blades in surprise. She hadn't known they were spelled. That is, charter marks running up and down these swords. She has Rana out. I'm going to skip a bunch. The thing tries to move, and 274. Touchstone. Right sword sheared through the creature just behind the head, the left wielded blade impaling its sinuous midsection. Pinned to the floor, the creature writhed and arched, and Sabriel stands over it, shaking the bell. She pulls out Kibeth, sleeper and master had spoken well, Walker sometimes had its own ideas, blah, 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 blah. And she says to Touchstone, this is a Mordout, a weak spirit cataloged as one of the lesser dead. They like to ride with the living, cohabiting the body, blah, blah, blah. So, she banishes it. Okay? So now they don't have a dead problem on the island anymore. The island is now clear. They've got to still make sure nothing happens here. So what do the islanders offer in thanks? Yeah, you can take a boat. Take any boat you want. You can take fish, too. She then looks at Touchstone. 277 says thanks. She looked down at his two swords, still deeply embedded in the wooden floor. They were no longer burning with silver flames, but she could see the charter marks. I didn't realize your swords were ensorcelled. Ensorceried, if you want. I'm glad they are. He said, I thought you knew. I took them from the Queen's ship. They were a royal champion swords. I didn't want to take them, but Mogget said, well, anyways, legend has it that the wall maker made them. The wall maker. What did we see on the wall? And if you got really close to it, the wall is charter marks. It's not stone with the charter kind of spelled into it. It's the matrix, essentially. Okay? So now we have swords made by whoever made this magical thing. The same wall maker as I suppose made your sword. Mine? And she realizes the sword reads, I was made for Abhorsen, to slay those already dead. So it was forged long ago, back in the distant past, when the wall... Mogget would know about that. But what does Mogget seemingly never do? What? Yeah. He doesn't freely give information. One reason is because of his binding. Another reason is how well do you learn if you've merely told everything? Not as well as having to kind of pull it out for yourself. Okay? So, they then realize the Mordicant has arrived. It's followed them all the way from Abhorsen's house. She says, can you sail a boat by night to Touchstone? He says, yes. Be dangerous, but yeah. She goes on, 281, says the Mordicant's gotten stronger. It feels my presence. Okay. 284. We start to get at when Touchstone said, if there were a child, you could learn something about the Great Charters from the child. There's a little girl, about 5 or so. And Sabriel says, tell me what you've learned about the Great Charters. 285. 5 Great Charters knit the land. The land is created by the charters, or the land is held together by the charters. Together, linked hand in hand, one in the people who wear the crown, royalty. So one of the charters is in royalty. 2 in the folk who keep the dead down, Abhorsens, or Abhorsen. 3 and 5 became stone and mortar. 4 sees all in frozen water. 3 and 5, stone and mortar. Wall. And or charter stones. Okay. I'm not saying that's what they are. I mean, it's pretty clear the 1 is royalty. 2 are in Abhorsen. 3 and 5 and 4, little unclear. Okay. 286. So, one of the great charters lay in the royal blood. What does she still not know? Royal blood, right next to her. The second lay in Abhorsens. So what were 3 and 5? And 4 that saw all in frozen water. All in frozen water. Well, she's not going to get a clue about that one. Not in this book. That's in book 2, yeah. She felt certain many answers would be found in Belisar. Her father could probably answer more, for many things that were bound in life were unraveled in death. There was her mother sending for that third and final questioning in the 7 years. But the Mordicant starts howling, so they take off as we have to take off. So they get in the water, and they sail on. Let's see, we're going to skip a bunch. Touchstone, beginning around 298, a little bit earlier, 297. She finally gets Sabriel to, Sabriel finally gets Touchstone to tell her what happened 200 years ago. Okay? He says, I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you some. Talks about one of the queen's sons, Roger, if you want, Rogier, whatever it is, her oldest son, playmate of his. Well, that's kind of weird. A lowly guard being a playmate of a prince. Anyways, he did what? What did Roger do? Yeah.
They lured the royal family into a cave to break the Great Charter Stones.
Page 301. There were 2 other guards. Okay, they attacked me. I went mad, battle mad, berserk, killed both guards. Roger jumped from the barge, wading to the stones, holding the cup, killed the queen. Okay? Came within an arm's length of me. Sabriel, 302. You should have told me. Perhaps it had to wait for the sea's freeing of that binding spell. Notice, the farther they get away from the land, the longer they're in the water, the binding kind of is removed. But pretty soon, they're going to get to right here, where they're going to enter essentially these gates. The gates are made of iron, and the closer they get to the gates, what happens to the binding? And the binding on Magat. I don't think of the binding, that Magat kind of loses the collar and becomes a free magic thing again. I mean, the binding that kind of binds Magat's mouth. Well, the longer they're in the water, the more Magat can say too.
That part about him being going battle man berserk, that's important for Clariel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's really important.
Really important.
For Clariel. Clariel's the third book. It's
Fourth book published.
Fourth book prequel. Published after the first three, but it talks about events that happen. Yeah. Way before. So, almost out of time. Notice, she really starts getting a lot of information, and what do they, we only got a minute. What should they do before going into that bay that I pointed out on the map? Throw an anchor down and just sit there for a while and let her pick their brains. But they don't. They keep going on. Why? Plot device. You got to keep going on. Because you can't have all the information divulged too quickly. It's got to be slowly brought out. For example, 306. Touchstone asks Magat, there's one thing I would like to ask. Who put my spirit in death? I know we are out of time. And made my body the figurehead? Magat, I never knew what happened to you. It must have been Aborson. You were insane when we got you out of the reservoir. Notice, we. That's why Magat says, you remember what you did, right? Fool. Touchstone is what I'm going to call you. Okay, so we will pick up. We can probably skip. Yeah, we'll pick up around chapter 20 on Monday.